Hello, I'm Pastor Angel Jackson from St. John in McZena, and I'm bringing the devotion for March 6th. It's Ash Wednesday, the first day of Lent. We're at the first station of the cross, Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. I'm going to read Matthew 26, 36 through 41 from the NRSV. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee and began to be grieved and agitated. Then he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me." And going a little further, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want." Then he came to his disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So could you not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into this time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." The Gospel of the Lord. Every time I read this passage, my first reaction is, really? Really, you couldn't stay awake on this of all nights? When the Lord is obviously having a big old breakdown in the garden just over there. Really? But today I was thinking about a time when my daughter Sophie was very young. She probably about 9 months old, and I was putting the laundry away, and so I set her in the middle of the bed, and I turned my back to put something in the closet, and when I turned back around, she was crawling towards the edge. Of course, I could not get there, and in that split second before I could, there was that horrible thunk of her head hitting the hardwood floor. So I scooped her up, and after like a minute of catching her breath, she of course started to scream at the top of her lungs and scream and scream. There's no blood, there's no lump, but here I am. I've got this baby in one arm, walking from one end of the apartment to the other, trying to calm her down, and I'm dialing the pediatrician with the other hand and trying to tell them what happened with this screaming baby. And the super calm, super chill pediatrician says, "It sounds like she bumped her head." I said, "Yeah, she bumped her head." And in the midst of trying to, press on him the seriousness of the situation, suddenly she stopped screaming, like mid-scream, and fell asleep. And then I panicked. "Oh my gosh, she fell asleep. Should I wake her up?" And the pediatrician was like, "She's not a middle-aged linebacker. She's going to be okay. You don't have to keep her awake. Let her sleep." And he went on to explain that when babies have been in a lot of pain and get really upset, they simply fall asleep. They shut down because it's too much to deal with, and it's a way of adjusting to the situation. The disciples have learned about Jesus' impending death. He's warned them of it. They know what's about to happen. They've watched him ride into town on a donkey, announcing himself as a fulfillment of the scriptures and a promising king attracting a crowd. They've heard his farewell speech, and now they are watching Jesus himself freak out. I'm wondering if their sleep was not just from the exhaustion of the last few days. And I don't think it's because they don't understand the seriousness, the immediacy of the situation, but maybe because they do, and they are overwhelmed. Like an injured child, the pain, the trauma, and the fear is too much, and their bodies and their minds shut down. They fall asleep. At all times, as in this season of Lent, Jesus is calling us to pray and to stay awake, to not shut down when the pain in the world, when reality is just too much. Though, like the disciples, I think it's understandable if we do sometimes. Yet during this season that begins today, we are called to stay awake and watch the hardest few days of Jesus' life, perhaps the hardest few days in history. We don't do this every year to feel guilty. Rather, we do it to remember and to practice. We stay awake and watchful through these events so that we might be able, in the midst of current hard times, with the memory that Jesus has been through it all, and that even in this death, and as in all deaths, God will bring about resurrection. God, in the midst of our weariest days, when life is overwhelming, remind us of your constant presence. Give us the strength to stay awake, reassurance of the forgiveness of our sleepiness, and give us a foretaste of the new thing to come. Amen.